So, yes, most people in this room will know the site, and I think we've picked this baton up about 15 months ago, and there's quite a long history of thinking and planning and business planning for this site to get to this point. Most of you will know the very significant grant funding that's come forward to get us moving on this. We always think of this site as historically been a really hard-working site for Shrewsbury over the almost millennia, as it has been, but now we need to find the next phase. And we've started. So this presentation will take you through how many steps we're going to need to take to deliver this. So the demolition contractor is moving on. He's moving quite well. You'll all have anecdotes, I'm sure, about friction on the ground. We're also, part of this first phase is to deliver a park, a new public park. And the contractor for that is in the second stage of procurement. Any procurement nerds can ask me some questions at the table, but hopefully the construction of the new park starts in the new year. And we've got detailed planning for the park. We've got a series of technical drawings, as you'd imagine, and visual renders. And the idea for the park is to start the development off with some good new public place. So instead of this feeling like a construction site for a long time, it's going to feel like a place from day one. We've started with an analysis of the town, as you might expect, and what we find trying to create the next generation of development is quite challenging in a town of the subtlety and the grain of Shrewsbury. And we've tried to focus on the public realm. We've tried to focus on breaking down the scale of development and creating place. It's a really large part of the town, and it's a really significant part of the town if you think about connectivity. You could describe this site as not very well connected, and I'm really thinking about pedestrians, and I'm thinking about why you would want to walk through there or be there. And one of our main things is to improve the quality of that connectivity and make pedestrians want to walk through the site. This is a really early concept. If you came to some of our public consultations, we have our key driver is to connect Pride Hill to Frankwell Bridge through the development with a really strong public pedestrian route, and that pedestrian route is shouldered or supported by the new park on Rouse Hill. This is really a simple graphic to show Shrewsbury's just benefits by so many wonderful quality places and quality pedestrian connectivity routes, and we really do see this as a bit of a gap in the town, a bit like a bad dentistry, like a missing tooth, and we'd like to put this back together again. With as I say, starting with landscape and starting with forging the greenery of the edge and folding that to create a gateway to the town centre. I'll probably stay away from wider movement strategy issues, but I'm happy to talk about this. As master planners, we have to plan for flexibility and resilience, whatever happens in the future, whatever happens to mobility, whatever happens to movement strategies. We have to be ready to embrace improvement, but also to deliver with what we've got. So very early concept of that route from Frankwell past the park. One of the things we're using the park for is to deal with and mitigate flooding. Flooding is a big constraint on this site, and we have to show the Environment Agency we can achieve a concept of betterment, which is to make the flooding situation better and not worse, and that's for the downstream events as well as our site. And that basically means we have to welcome the floodwater into the development, which sounds a strange concept. And we've done that with effectively floodable undercrofts. And one way we're handling that change of level is by the delivery of the park. This is it's a bit of an esoteric slide, but the park, you'll see the park is very much about geology. It's very much the local stone. A couple of facts. You'll all know as residents that Darwin's first passion was geology. And you might also know that Shropshire is the county of the country with the most natural forms of sedimentary and other rock formations, and we're building the park on a concept of rock strata. And here's a more detailed, we're moving through the planning process, a more detailed axonometric of the park that's coming forward in the new year. And as you can imagine, we're now out procuring these parks. You can imagine we're now at technical drawing stage. And some of the visuals which I can show you, I've always found this easier to do around the model because it's such a three-dimensional site and four-dimensional if you add time into this. So you have to think about this unfolding in a series of steps. There's just a series of visuals of the park. this is a difficult slide to get through. So the number of steps also means a number of planning processes. We're going to get the ball rolling with 4 planning applications. The first planning application is done and dusted, which was the demolition of the Riverside Centre and the delivery of the park. The second planning application is literally going out in the next 10 days, if my team can keep up, which is the most complicated planning application. It's the outline planning application for the Riverside. And the key thing about the outline application is flexibility. So we really rather think of the master plan as a circuit board into which you can plug different components. So for each of the 3 plots on the Riverside, we're securing planning consents for residential, office and hotel. So what is delivered ultimately is to do with partnerships and market interest and further support. So the building plots, so snappily named 3, 5 and 6. So plot 3 is closest to the current Pride Hill Centre and to Mardle. And the illustrative scheme you have on the screen now is an office option, which I can show you on the model, and just some views of that office development. And we're starting to work through, in outline planning jargon, this is called the design code. So we will not be getting detailed consent for the buildings or the elevations, but we have to work with the planners to determine the material palette that we're going to go forward with. And you might not know that Shrewsbury is one of the national pilots for design coding. You have to be a bit of a nerd to sort of engage with that one. Now, the project also includes Pride Hill. So a little bit after Riverside, we move on to Pride Hill, which is the big shopping centre, which is currently a big brick box, fully internal facing, as one would design a retail scheme in the 80s or 90s. Our idea is to turn this scheme inside out. So this scheme is going to be about lanes, or shuts as you would know them, and courtyards, and orientation of these courtyards to the view. This is a slightly elevated view above the river, so there are new views to be had, and this will connect to Pride Hill through the existing archway to the historic centre, which I can show you on the model. And the idea is to sort of open up this with a series of courtyards and meanwhile spaces. A couple of before and afters. These might not register very well. These are quite tentative. So that's the view from Mardle, which is the big brick box on the corner. And our scheme takes that brick box away and it puts smaller pavilions in its place. I forgot to mention that we are retaining the service yard almost like a tabletop. Half of the structure is very useful to us in terms of a foundation solution, support, retaining support for the town centre, and a flooding solution, and obviously a useful service yard. So to use all that and exploit the embodied carbon and take the programme benefits from construction seems a worthwhile thing to do. I can show you that on the model as well. And again, a couple of views that you'll know. So you're looking up Rouse Hill Bank, and I suppose if you put your eye on those steps represent the top, the lid of the service yard that we're building from. And you can see those steps again, and you can see the opening up of the scheme and your invitation into a series of courtyards that will take you down to Frankwell or up to Pride Hill. And then in that project, we're also moving forward. Now, this will not be outlined. There are a series of heritage reasons, a series of very, very sensitive buildings in this locale, which means Historic England will not allow an outline consent for this site, and we're moving forward to a detailed planning application. And we're building up our palette of materials. And these, if you came to the public consultation, some of these are our preliminary renders of how we might be able to bring this leisure project forward, which is leisure and food and beverage and some small retail. And these are just a couple of the views, very tentative early views of the courtyards of the development. The gap site. So does everybody know the gap site? So it's referred to as the gap site because it's the site where the car parking is, which is squashed between the Darwin Centre and Pride Hill. We don't think of it as a gap site when Pride Hill is demolished, because it won't be a gap. It will be a west-facing development site with a lot of potential. And these are just some very early sketches now. We've got a couple of options for the gap site coming forward. One is office and one is hotel. And we're in, I don't know how much I can or can't say. We're quite active with partners and tenants and prospective users who obviously it's very interesting for regeneration to secure the tenants, but from an architectural perspective, it's very useful to talk to these tenants because they test our parameters, they test what we're doing to make sure the flexibility and resilience is in the project. and a couple more of visuals of how the gap site will be integrated into the proposal, including some of the workplace interiors. There's a very interesting piece of medieval architecture hanging above the gap site that most people in the town know as ex-McDonald's. It's not very easy to appreciate it, but one of our ideas for the gap site is to create a south-facing cloister, to integrate that piece of historic wall into a landscape cloister with the leisure projects and the office projects enclosing that cloister. But that's a view of the cloister, and a view. One of the things, whether it's a hotel or an office, this will give a slightly elevated view over the river and over Frankwell, which we think is a really strong sell for the site. My words. That's it. Thank you very much. I hope I can take you through that at the model. Thank you.